Their prayer beads slipped silently through weathered fingers. Children, who might otherwise be laughing or playing, whispered instead. It wasn't fear that hushed them. It was something older, something sacred. In the far corner of a small mosque, a barefoot 7-year-old girl moved across the tiled floor with quiet purpose. Her black headscarf draped over her completely, revealing only a pair of solemn brown eyes that glanced now and then toward the main prayer hall. Inside, a group of women sat in a tight circle, heads bowed in silence. There were no chants, no rituals, no grand processions, only remembrance. Silent remembrance. The soft sound of stifled sobs broke the stillness now and then. They weren't grieving loudly, yet their sorrow ran deep. They mourned a man they called the Lantern of Justice, a name, Hussein, a place, Karbala, and a grief so ancient it might have been carved into time itself, and yet it still felt as raw as if it had happened just yesterday. The little girl swept with methodical calm. She didn't weep like the others, but there was something in her quiet labor that held more weight than any tear. Every Muharram since she could walk, she had cleaned this mosque. Her mother once called her the daughter of dignity. She didn't move out of obligation, nor did she perform some hollow ritual. What she did out of a sense of sacred duty. Across a barbed wire-lined border, less than 5 kilometers away, an Israeli military unit huddled inside a temporary operations tent. A covert mission was in motion. Intelligence suggested a local resistance figure was hiding somewhere in Gaza's eastern district. The assignment: infiltrate, observe, engage only if provoked. Among the team was 28-year-old Gabriel Ben Yov, an elite commando with a reputation for precision, defiance, and icy contempt. His uniform clung to him like a second skin, but it wasn't the Kevlar vest that weighed most heavily. It was his arrogance. His comrades called him the Falcon for his sharp eyes and sharper instincts, but his heart was colder still. Gabriel didn't merely follow orders, he relished control. He craved superiority. He had never set foot inside Gaza, and he didn't see it as a city, more a forsaken labyrinth, described in his family's stories with contempt and curses. He had grown up hearing of those people. Backward zealots always crying, always shouting God's name, their obsession with pain, their sanctification of loss. It all irritated him. When he learned the operation would begin on the first day of Muharram, a smirk tugged at his lips. Muharram, he sneered, their mourning season begins. Perfect time to sneak in while they're busy weeping for ghosts. No one replied. The younger soldiers averted their gaze when he spoke that way. Whether or not they agreed, none dared echo him. Not when he wore his pride like a blade. As dusk fell, the unit moved under cover of shadows, slipping through the underground tunnel systems that led into eastern Gaza. But somewhere along the dim alleys and sandbagged turns, Gabriel was cut off. The radio crackled, then died. GPS blinked out. He was alone. At first, it didn't trouble him. He was trained for this. Solo navigation, enemy terrain. He'd done it before. But something about the stillness here disturbed him. He moved carefully. His boots patted softly against the sand-slick concrete. No gunfire, no shouting, no threat, just silence, and black flags fluttering above closed doorways. He turned down a residential lane, low brick walls, faded paint, and, at its far end, a mosque. At its entrance, a small girl in black was sweeping. The same girl. She didn't notice him at first. Her movements were deliberate, her broom brushing dust in slow arcs. She was humming. Not a tune exactly, more like a rhythm born of sorrow. Gabriel paused. He wasn't afraid, not exactly, just caught off guard. "What is this?" he muttered. He approached, slow and cautious. His shadow reached her feet. She looked up. Their eyes met. His cold, calculating gaze against her calm, steady one. "You," he said in heavily accented Arabic. "Why are you sweeping the ground? Are you mourning the dust, too?" She said nothing. Her eyes lowered. She kept sweeping. The silence struck him harder than any insult. "I asked you a question," he snapped. "Who are you crying for? Someone who died centuries ago? That makes sense to you?" Still, she remained silent. Inside the mosque, the women's sobs had gone quiet. The air shifted. Even the wind had stopped. Gabriel stepped closer, bending slightly. "Tell me," he said, "where is your God now? If he's so great, why did your hero die thirsty? Why do you people mourn him every year like fools?" She turned to face him. Her expression was composed, but her eyes shimmered. Not with fear, not with grief, but something deeper. Dignity, defiance. "You call it crying," she said softly. "We call it remembering. We remember someone who stood for truth when the black flags." Just the heavy silence. Something shifted inside him. He didn't know what it was. Rage, shame, or perhaps a fear he didn't want to name. He shook his head violently. "No," he whispered. "These people don't get to be right. This is all nonsense." But as he turned, a gust of wind slapped a black flag into his face like a whip. It didn't hurt, but it stopped him cold. He looked up. The sky had turned a strange, ominous gray. Not the color of evening, but something heavier. Like the heavens were dressing for morning. Clouds rolled in, slow and brooding, as if gathering to bear witness. Gabriel stood at the edge of the narrow street, jaw tight, fists clenched at his sides. The wind had delivered more than cloth. It had delivered a message. He turned from the mosque. He didn't look at the girl again, but he felt her still, like a weight pressing against his back. Her words echoed in his head. "Our God waits, and he never forgets." He muttered something crude in Hebrew under his breath and slipped back into the alley, eyes darting. Still no noise, no chatter, no signs of life. Only the low, distant sound of women reciting verses. Soft, mournful. He tried the radio again. "Unit 6 to command. Come in." Static. He adjusted the frequency. "Command, do you read me? I'm separated. Eastern sector. Coordinates." Silence. Frustration burned in his throat. He was trained for this. Trained for solitude. But something about this quiet made his training feel useless. The Gaza he read about in mission briefings was never like this. It was supposed to be loud, angry, chaotic, but this was something else. He leaned against a wall, breathing slow. The concrete felt cool, but his palms were damp. "Get a grip," he muttered. "They're just being dramatic." But this silence wasn't drama. It was reverence, ancient, sacred, and it was pressing down on his lungs. He moved on, weaving through archways and narrow lanes, but the girl's voice lingered. "Our God waits. He never forgets." "Certainly. Here's a rephrased and rewritten version of your text. I've kept the tone, structure, and length intact while improving the clarity, flow, and literary depth. The emotional and narrative integrity is fully preserved." He walked along winding alleys where the paths narrowed between aging stone walls. From time to time he passed houses with their windows veiled in cloth, privacy wrapped in grief. Every door bore a single black ribbon, tied loosely like mourning silently whispering from each threshold. At one intersection, a small handmade banner flapped in the breeze. Scrawled in uneven Arabic calligraphy were the words, "Every land is Karbala. Every day is Ashura." Gabriel scoffed aloud. "Martyr slogans," he muttered under his breath. "This whole place breathes like a funeral." His stomach growled, a dull reminder that he hadn't eaten since morning. But hunger was low on his list of concerns. His boots moved steadily, but his mind was anything but calm. A strange weight clung to him, heavier than fatigue, more persistent than fear. Something like guilt, though he'd never believed in such things. Guilt was for the weak. His training had been designed to smother empathy. Emotion made soldiers hesitate. But that girl, Her silence had pierced through something in him he hadn't known was exposed. Why was she there? Why wasn't she afraid? Why did her eyes look like they had lived through 1,000 battles and carried none of the chaos? His thoughts were suddenly interrupted by a sharp metallic clang. Gabriel froze. His hand instinctively moved to his weapon, half drawing it. Silence followed. Nothing moved. He pivoted and entered a narrow side alley. The air was denser here, thick with the scent of dust and incense. A small stone basin sat beneath a weathered fig tree, collecting stagnant rainwater. Above it, a mural had been painted, an image of a dove pierced by arrows, encircled by olive branches. The symbolism struck him, but he had no time to dwell on it. His right boot slipped on the edge of the basin, cracking the stone. He flailed, catching himself, his hand plunging directly into the water. A sudden, searing sting shot through him. He cursed, yanking his hand free. Water dripped from his fingers, but the pain was not from cold. It burned, as if something acidic had seeped under his skin. "What the hell?" he hissed, inspecting his palm. There were no visible cuts or bruises, but the skin was red and raw. The pain intensified rapidly. He wiped his hand on his uniform, but it brought no relief. A deep, crawling heat began slithering up his arm, from wrist to elbow. This wasn't shock, wasn't adrenaline. It was too visceral, too deliberate. He stumbled backward from the basin, chest rising with panic. "It's in your head," he whispered. "You're tired. Get out. Find the team." But the burn refused to fade. He staggered back onto the main street. The girl was gone. So were the women. The mosque. An old man stood on the balcony, leaning on a cane. His beard was silver, his eyes clouded but steady. "What did you say?" Gabriel barked. The old man didn't even blink. "That basin only gathers water during Muharram," he said. "It holds the memory of thirst, a tribute to those denied water in their final hours." Gabriel stared, unsure of how to respond. "And you," the man continued, voice like stone, "mock remembrance. You touched grief with dirty hands. Now grief answers you." Gabriel raised his weapon slightly but didn't fire. His hand burned hotter, pulsing with something unbearable. He turned and ran. He didn't know for how long, 10 minutes, an hour. It blurred into a haze of shadows and trembling breath. Eventually, he collapsed inside an abandoned garage near the outskirts of the district. Rusted beams, crumbling walls, dust hanging in still air. He fell to the floor, gasping. His hand had swollen grotesquely, skin blotched and red. At its center, a blister had formed, oddly shaped like a teardrop. "This isn't normal," he whispered, staring at his palm. "This isn't a reaction. This isn't natural." His head swam. Sweat rolled down his spine. His thoughts were racing. Images of the girl, the black flag, the old man, the name Hussein. The pain now matched the rhythm of his heartbeat. From far away, as though riding the wind itself, a voice seemed to whisper, "The oppressed do not die. They wait." Gabriel pressed his burning hand to his chest, and for the first time in his adult life, he was afraid. He hadn't slept. The pain in his hand had gone from a sting to a burning pulse that wrapped around his bones like fire. The rest of his body felt untouched, but something inside was tearing apart, unraveling thread by thread. Inside the rusted garage, he sat against a wall, drenched in sweat. His breathing was ragged. His uniform was streaked with dust, dirt, and something else. Fear. The wind hadn't stopped since nightfall. Occasionally it slipped through the cracks in the garage door, sounding like a quiet, mournful sigh. It stirred the dread building inside him. He looked down at his hand. The blister in the center had grown darker, still teardrop-shaped, now surrounded by faint bruises that pulsed with each beat of his heart. "It's nothing," he lied aloud. "Just an allergic reaction. Just contaminated water." But even he didn't believe that anymore. He tore through his gear, fumbling for antiseptic and painkillers. He wrapped his hand tightly in cloth. Nothing helped. The pain wasn't on the surface. It was inside him, winding through his nerves like it had a purpose. His radio remained dead. GPS, still reading, error. He should have feared capture, interrogation, death. Instead, he feared something worse. Why this was happening. The girl's voice came back to him, calm, unshaken. We remember someone who stood for truth when the world bowed to lies. Our God never forgets. And the old man's eyes, gray, unmoving, his words no longer warnings but declarations. Sentences passed. Gabriel let out a bitter, broken laugh. He, the trained soldier, the falcon of the 5th Brigade, was being undone by superstition, by memory. I've burned homes, I've shot militants, I've raided mosques, and not once did anything happen like this. So why now? Why her? That question choked in his throat. Her, the girl, her eyes, that unshakable silence. She hadn't begged, she hadn't run, she had simply remembered, and that made her dangerous. I will not be broken by a child, he snarled. He kicked over a rusted bucket, the clang echoing through the ruined garage like an alarm. But then, something strange, a new sound. From the corner of the room, near the collapsed ceiling, dripping, software measured, drip, drip, drip. He turned. Nothing visible. No pipe, no leak, no water. Yet the sound grew louder, inside his ears like it lived beneath his skull. Drip, drip, drip. He staggered back, pressing his hands to his temples. Then a voice, soft, female, haunting, unfolded in his mind like smoke. The thirst of a child. The silence of a father. The cruelty of an army. No, he whispered, voice cracking. This is psychological warfare. I'm dehydrated, hallucinating. He stormed out of the garage. The streets were still empty. Dawn hadn't broken fully, but the sky had begun to lighten, threatening the dark. He needed shelter, help, something. He turned into a side alley and stumbled across a modest home. The courtyard gate was ajar. A plastic chair lay tipped over. A clay pot of water rested on a ledge. His instincts screamed, "Leave." His mind said, "Enter." He stepped in. The house was silent. No voices, no signs of life. But across the room, on a wall, he saw a poster of a young boy, eyes bright, framed in delicate Arabic calligraphy. He couldn't read all the words, but one stood out clearly. Shaheed, martyr. Next to it sat a shelf, a candle, a small cup of rosewater, a few worn books. He wasn't a believer, not of religion, not of tradition. But his throat tightened. I didn't know, he stammered. She looked directly into his eyes, but her voice was no longer just her own. It carried echoes like 1,000 voices speaking through one. Knowing was never required, she said. Intent was enough. You mocked pain. Now pain knows your name. Gabriel broke. Tears surged down his face, hot, ashamed, relentless. He sobbed not like a soldier, but like a man who'd been torn open. Please, he begged, make it stop. I'll leave. I swear. I won't come back. She rose to her feet slowly. You can leave Gaza, she said. But can you leave what has already entered you? She turned and walked away, vanishing into the thinning morning mist. He watched her go, helpless, hollow. His right hand, the one that had touched the basin, the one that had grabbed, pointed, mocked, was no longer burning. It was worse. It was numb, a dead thing attached to a living body. He tried to move it. Nothing. And in the hush of dawn, only one thought possessed him. You mocked their grief. Now your soul will grieve forever. He lay there, crumpled on the cold stone floor, light creeping through the cracks of the house he had trespassed. His uniform, once pristine and symbolic of command, was now stained with dust, sweat, and fear. His right arm, his dominant arm, was limp, useless, unresponsive. The rest of him, though, still burned. A fire not on his skin but inside, crawling through his veins, gnawing at his spine. This wasn't illness. He'd known fever before, during winter deployments in desolate outposts. No, this was deeper, more pointed, like guilt that had been ignited and now glowed inside his bones. His mouth was dry, his lips cracked, but he no longer had the strength to speak. He had screamed all he could. Now only silence remained, broken by shallow, labored breathing, as if every inhale needed penance. Outside, the sound of a distant recitation began to rise. Hal min Nasir, is there anyone left to help me? It wasn't a mere chant. It was a cry that had lived centuries. Not a plea for victory, but a call for humanity. Gabriel's stomach turned violently. He crawled, dragging his dead weight of an arm inch by inch toward the door. Every movement felt like his bones were tearing apart from within. What began as an operation had become a sentence, and he was living it. He reached the doorway. The first rays of sunlight hit his face. The lane was quiet. The black ribbon still hung, unmoving, as if even the wind had chosen to mourn in silence. Then he saw them. At the far end of the street they came. Women draped in black, walking solemnly, children by their sides. Some held clay jugs filled with water. Others carried placards with Arabic calligraphy. Their faces showed not terror, but remembrance. At the head of the procession was a boy, no older than 10, carrying an unlit candle held upright like a torch of purpose. Gabriel recoiled, pulling himself back into the shadows of the home. He didn't want them to see him, not like this, not as a soldier, not even as a man, but as whatever he had become. One of the children, a little girl, different from before but bearing the same gaze, paused. She looked at him, her eyes wide, unreadable. Gabriel tried to speak. Nothing came. She didn't scream. She didn't call for help. She simply turned and walked on, as if his existence was not a threat, but an outcome. He slumped again to the floor, not wounded, not bleeding, but unraveling. His soul was fraying from the inside out. Time slipped by. The sun rose higher. He remained alone in that house. He checked his radio again. Dead. He looked at his hand. Ashen, graying, lifeless. Then it struck. His chest clenched violently, not in the heart, but behind it. A pressure, sharp, as if his ribs had turned into fists refusing to release breath. He clawed at the floor, trying to stay conscious. And then, footsteps. He looked up. It wasn't a soldier. It wasn't the girl. It was the imam. An older man entered the house through the open doorway. His presence was powerful in its calmness. He wore a black cloak and a white turban. His face was marked by grief, not anger, dignified sorrow, not revenge. Behind him stood the girl, the same one from the mosque. She said nothing, eyes lowered, scarf neatly pinned. The imam approached. Gabriel tried to rise. His body failed him again. "Who are you?" he gasped. The imam didn't reply at first. He looked at Gabriel's useless hand, then into his eyes. When he finally spoke, his words were not a threat, but a mirror. "You do not need my name," he said. "You already met the message." Gabriel's breath hitched. What? What is this? What's happening to me?" The imam circled slowly, not with fear, but with measure, as if weighing Gabriel's soul. "You entered this land carrying pride," he said. "You believed yourself immune to pain. You thought you could touch what was sacred and walk away untouched." "I didn't kill anyone," Gabriel cried, voice broken. The imam looked at him. "Not all sins. This is not for your thirst," she said. "It's to remind you what thirst feels like when it is never quenched." The imam rose. "We will not harm you," he said. "But what has touched you? Only repentance can soften it." Gabriel looked up, hollow and sincere. "Then show me how to repent." The Imam turned his gaze toward the light outside. "Begin with remembrance," he said. "Not of yourself, but of those you once mocked. Say his name." Gabriel closed his eyes. His lips quivered, and for the first time, not as a soldier but as a soul yearning for light, he whispered, "Hussein." And as the name passed his lips, something shifted. Not in the world, but within. Not fire, not pain, just a moment of stillness. And in that silence, a beginning. There was no sudden healing, no miracle. But something shifted, just for a moment. It was as if the fire that had wrapped itself around his bones paused, took a breath. Gabriel clung to that breath like a drowning man to driftwood. The Imam stood in silence, watching. His daughter had already stepped back, her eyes lowered, refusing to meet Gabriel's gaze again. He wanted to speak, to say something, but the words choked him, heavy and sharp, caught in his throat like stones. His chest ached, muscles tightened, and the creeping numbness in his right arm continued to climb, dragging his shame with it. Finally, the Imam broke the silence. "You have opened a door," he said, his voice calm, unwavering, "but to step through it, you must walk with truth, not regret." Gabriel, barely able to breathe, rasped, "Then help me walk." The Imam glanced at his daughter and gave a solemn nod. "Come." With immense effort, Gabriel was helped to his feet. The Imam didn't touch him, but his presence guided him, quietly, firmly. Gabriel leaned against the wall, legs trembling, the world around him warped, dreamlike. Dust hung in the air like judgment. Each step felt as if he were walking through the weight of his own past. They emerged into the narrow street. The black flags once again fluttered faintly as though acknowledging their passage. People began to appear at their doors, quiet, cautious. A wounded Israeli soldier walking through a Gaza neighborhood should have triggered panic, rage, retribution. But not this day. Not during Muharram. Mothers drew their children close. Men folded their arms across their chests. Some looked at the Imam. Others stared at Gabriel. No one moved, but he felt their gaze, less hateful than hollow, as if they were trying to comprehend a thing they had no name for. He heard someone whisper, "Is that him? The one who struck the girl? Laughed at the mosque? Why is he still alive?" But no one stepped forward. This was a different kind of reckoning, a different justice. They reached the mosque, the same humble building with the quiet door where it had all begun. Gabriel stopped at the threshold. He couldn't walk in, not because he was barred, but because he felt unworthy. The Imam stood beside him and said gently, "This house welcomes the broken more than the proud." Gabriel entered. Cool air met him. Stillness. Peace. In the corner, a group of women sat again, heads bowed, shoulders trembling. The same soft sobs echoed in the silence, but they struck him differently now. They were not just sounds. They were weight. The girl walked forward once more. She placed a small jug of water at the front of the room, then stepped back into the shadows. Gabriel's eyes swept the space. No icons, no symbols, only the echo of grief. He dropped to his knees. Pain surged again, but this time it felt deserved. It wasn't meaningless suffering. It was consequence. "I don't know what I believe," he whispered. "I was trained to destroy, not remember. But something here, something in your grief, it broke me." The Imam nodded. Grief is a mirror. It doesn't only show us who we've lost, it shows us who we are. Gabriel looked down at his lifeless hand. "I mocked them," he said. "Their rituals, her scarf, their tears. I deserved worse." The Imam sat beside him. "Perhaps, but what you deserve is not the end. It's the beginning." Gabriel's voice cracked. "Will your people ever forgive me?" The Imam was quiet for a long moment. Then he replied, "Forgiveness does not belong to me. It belongs to those you wounded, and to God. Just then, the mosque door opened. 3 men entered. Their faces were carved by time and sorrow. One had been slapped by Gabriel, another had his market stall overturned, the third had lost his son, not by Gabriel's hand but by the uniform he wore. Now they stood before him. Gabriel didn't look up. The first man spoke. "Do you remember me?" Gabriel nodded, eyes on the floor. "Yes, I called you insects." A pause. The second spoke. "You called my grief noise. You shoved my child." Silence again. Then the third. "You said justice was yours." Gabriel braced for it. A fist, a kick, spit. He deserved all of it. Instead, one of them stepped forward and said, "And now, justice has come, but not F. This," she said softly, "is not forgiveness. It is memory. Wear it until your soul remembers more than your body ever could." Gabriel nodded, his throat thick with emotion. That night, he was invited to sit in the mosque courtyard among the men. It was an honor and a test. He listened to stories of martyrdom, of loss, of courage at Karbala. No one asked him to speak, but eventually he did. He told them the truth, of how he was raised, trained, shaped to dominate, not understand. He didn't justify it. He confessed it. "I came here to silence you," he said, "but it is your silence that silenced me." Some nodded. Some still looked away, but no one stopped him. The next morning, Gabriel asked the imam for a private moment. They stood beneath the old fig tree in the courtyard, the same place where Gabriel had once collapsed. "What happens now?" he asked. The imam gave a faint smile. "Now you return. To Israel." "No," the imam replied. "To truth, wherever it takes you." Gabriel hesitated. "And if truth brings me back here?" The imam looked into his eyes. "Then live it. Don't just speak of it. Can I ever pray like one of you?" "One who bows sincerely is never turned away by the earth," the imam said. "But let Allah decide how he welcomes you. Until then, sweep his house, serve his people." Gabriel nodded. Later that day he sat alone beneath a shattered window. He looked at his dead hand and whispered, "I mocked tears. Now I cry without sound. I broke fasts. Now hunger teaches me patience." He looked up at the sky. "I don't know your name yet, but I know your fire, and I know you do not forget." The black ribbon danced around his wrist in the breeze. In the distance, drums beat slowly. Children in black passed through the alley holding banners. One read, "Truth may be slaughtered, but it never dies." Gabriel smiled, not with pride, with peace. His hand was lost, but maybe, just maybe, his heart had finally been found.